I want to emphasize this by saying this video is for educational purposes. This video will contain discussions of all of these topics meant to educate, not platform. Every clip that I am about to use is not an endorsement, but rather to highlight who this person is, and put together a story for the audience to absorb and come to their own conclusions. Although I will be putting my personal opinions forward in this video, I will also be presenting all sides of the story so that you aren't only seeing my perspective. Because by only giving you my personal opinion, you won't get to see the full picture of this story. I also want to say this. This video is not to harass nor attack anyone involved, only to make counter arguments and to present personal opinions of myself and others in opposition. However, these opinions should never be a call to action. This video should never be an endorsement to harass or threaten anybody. This is going to be a video that presents itself as serious, but my undertones will be to entertain as to make this video more digestible for an audience. Because the topics are so heavy-handed, and because I don't want to give a serious platform to someone so reprehensible, it's only fair that I at least joke about it just a little bit, just so it's not all doom and gloom on this channel all the time. Everything we are about to discuss is public knowledge and can be accessible through public access. So now that we've got that disclaimer out of the way, let's start at the very end and work our way backwards to find out who the hell is Nick Fuentes?
This is the story of a man named
Nick Fuentes.
And that's what you get. And that's a pretty sweet deal. And you get to live with a genius. You get to live with a funny, charming genius who's very demanding also. Who's very demanding and moody and sometimes abusive. Sometimes, not physically, but I am like psychologically abusive. I just can't help it.
Close your fucking mouth, you're just really fucking dense. If you hate me while you talking, you don't make no fucking sense. Got a sad life, go to fucking hell. Are you stupid or disabled, man? I can't fucking tell. Man, you're a fucking dumb shit, you don't even run shit. Get the fuck up out my face and go to hell and eat a dick. Come and catch these hands, boy, come and match these bands, boy. I'm not crazy, I just do it all because I can, boy. I hope you fucking die in a high-speed car crash. I hope you fucking fall head first and get your neck cracked. I hope you have some beautiful children that die from cancer. I hope you catch Zika when your wife gets pregnant. I hope you win the lottery and die the next day, and your daughter has to see you getting lowered in your grave. Like, that was a little dark. I'm sorry. That was a little dark.
Very poor taste.
Shut the fuck
and
up.
You better start being nice to people like us.
Stop being a fucking cunt.
What comes out of
Shut the fuck up.
Is gonna be a lot uglier and a lot worse.
Nobody even wants you here.
So, our story begins the week of Thanksgiving. 2 days prior to the holiday, former president and businessman Donald Trump was at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Springs. Couple things to note about Mar-a-Lago. The resort is owned by Donald Trump, who acquired the national landmark in 1985. He considered it his winter White House during his term, and it was raided in May of 2020 after Trump used it as a place of storage of essential documents from the White House, of which he still had after he left office. So that's rather concerning. It is presumed by this time of the story that the resort was raided and all the documents were taken back, allegedly, so this part doesn't really even matter. Anyways, so Trump is at Mar-a-Lago meeting for a luncheon with 4 other people. Who are the special guests for this evening? Well, one of those guests went unreported, but we'll get back to that. Up first, we have Kanye West.
And I'm Kanye West.
Rapper and founder of his own political party, The Birthday Party. I am not even joking, that is what he called it. Go look it up. Up next, Milo Yiannopoulos, former anti-SJW speaker and right-leaning political activist, who is part of the ex-gay community. And the main antagonist of our story, Nick Fuentes. Now, in terms of the other 2 characters here, you'd think that Fuentes would be just as wacky as much as the next guy sitting next to him, and although that is somewhat true, Nick stands out as someone who has waited for this moment for a very long time. You see, for many years, following in the footsteps of other openly right-wing nationalists like Richard Spencer,
I win, they lose. That's how the world works. Little they get ruled by people like me. Little my ancestors enslaved those pieces of I rule the world.
Nick has been praising Donald Trump since the very beginning of his campaign, and now, for the first time ever, Nick is face to face with the man he feels brought America to its glorious era. But here's the thing that confuses me about these four. You see, these two are high-profile people, part of the 1%. This one is worth an estimated $3 million and has been invited to speak around the country. And then there's Nick, just some guy with not a recorded net worth that I could find, whose only platform was YouTube.com. Now, it's not uncommon for social media influencers to meet with political figures, including the president if they're lucky. The issue was, at this point, Nick didn't have a YouTube channel, because at this point, it had been banned off of YouTube. In order to get to the bottom of Nick's story, we need to work our way backwards, because right now, Nick's ego is inflated. Despite his many bans off of social media and most political circles wanting absolutely nothing to do with him, to be able to have lunch with his political hero is peak notoriety for him. But if we're going to break this story down, we need to go back to the start to humble Nick a little bit and remind him of how he started, in order to highlight how weird of a jump this is from being a niche political commentator coming straight out of college, now dining with the former president. One has to ask, how did we get here? Hello, everyone. See, the last time I wore this wig, bad things happened. Fuck it, let's do it again. So in January of 2020, Nick's YouTube channel and appointed shows related to the channel, America First with Nick Fuentes, was demonetized by YouTube in violation of their hate speech policies. But even before that, Nick Fuentes was a frequent political streamer before being banned off of most social media platforms. But Fuentes still managed to find a way to stream. The same month that his YouTube channel was demonetized, DLive, another streaming platform similar to live streaming platforms like Twitch, reported that Fuentes was one of their most viewed live streamers. Now, a little context on DLive. DLive has a very lax enforcement policy when it comes to TOS violations on their platform. Twitch, which is a juggernaut that holds the monopoly on streaming platforms, has an infamous history with their unfair treatment of their terms of service. For example, the time that streamer was caught having an intimate moment live on stream was only suspended for 7 days, while streamers with far less of an offense will be suspended for weeks to up to a month, or even permanently banned off of Twitch. This in turn made DLive very appealing as an alternative for people wanting a more fair TOS system. But what ended up happening instead was absolutely no enforcement of TOS whatsoever, so the site slowly went into chaos.
In following PewDiePie's absence from the website, it was only a matter of time before someone took over the top spots. On Valentine's Day 2020, Nick Fuentes would be banned from YouTube. Having already established a presence on DLive and having nowhere else to really go at the time, he quickly made it his main platform to host his streams. And on DLive, Nick and similar creators would pull in a lot of money. In an article published by the Southern Poverty Law Center called "Extremists Are Cashing In on a Youth-Targeted Gaming Website," it states that 75 controversial streamers they were tracking made almost $500,000 on the website between April 16th, 2020 and late October 2020. At the top of the list was comedian Owen Benjamin and commentator Nick Fuentes, neck and neck, each making about $62,000 in DLive's cryptocurrency during the time period. Political activist Patrick Casey would make $50,000, America First Students founder Jada McNeil would make $32,000, and others would also make a nice chunk of change as well. The most prolific donator the SPLC mentioned was a user named T-Based, who gave about $7,000 to Patrick Casey, about $5,000 to Fuentes, and $3,500 to McNeil, along with hundreds of dollars to other streamers such as Jesse Lee Peterson and Charlotte. Controversial right-wing creators literally took over DLive. In a Time magazine article from 2020, it says on June 29th, Nick's stream had 56% of the viewers on the website watching his stream at 10 p.m., while another 39% were watching 22 other controversial streamers. On August 10th, only 176 of the total 15,000 viewers on the top 20 channels were watching non-right-wing content.
And what what's disappointing about all this is that DLive sounded like it would have been a far better alternative to Twitch. Whereas Twitch oftentimes goes out of its way to fight against its own content creators, for instance, with percentages raising from what was a 70-30 split to know that only being the case with high-profile streamers, while the rest of the streamers underneath that 1% are seeing a 50% cut in their donations, paid subscriptions, and their super chats. With DLive, it advertised that streamers would get 100% of the cut in donations.
So I checked out DLive and I could see that everyone benefits from the platform.
DLive does not take anything from you. Whatever you earn is yours.
You can choose to cash out with them. You can choose to use those as donations that you could give to other streamers, or you can do what I do, and that's just reinvest it back into the platform.
Your moderators also kind of get paid while they also help out the chat as well as interact with your stream.
The community on DLive is so strong and so supportive. It's warm and welcoming to new members that are coming in, and it's something that I've never experienced before.
And DLive would solely be dependent on their numbers and advertisers, which, considering all of the controversies that have been happening on DLive, I don't know how profitable that's going for them right now. Interestingly enough, Alex Jones, when he was banned off of most social media platforms, was also barred from DLive as well. And out of all of the YouTubers and streamers that would go on to promote and choose DLive as an alternative platform, PewDiePie, one of the biggest YouTubers, would sign a business deal with DLive that would increase their user base by 67%. In August of 2020, a whistleblower would come forward. Time magazine would report that the former employee that wished to remain anonymous due to his association with the company at the time that he came forward, claimed that they cared more about having good numbers than they do weeding out these people. Coming out after this, one of the founders of DLive, Charles Wan, had their emails leaked to the New York Times. And the emails revealed that Wan did want to ban white supremacist content and streamers from the platform and make harsher restrictions on alt-right content. But he decided not to in fear that DLive's numbers would decrease due to the massive amount of people they would have to ban off their platform or the exodus of creators that would come with these new changes. Now, if this were a numbers game, that would be one thing. DLive is making headlines as a competitor to Twitch, as the better alternative, and they have one of the biggest YouTubers signed to the platform. But their political bias would briefly change the direction that DLive was heading towards. After the George Floyd incident and the protests that would follow, it was reported that DLive's Twitter account would briefly change its bio to All Lives Matter in response to the events. Now, regardless of what you feel about that statement or the movement behind it, it's been heavily criticized as to be a political opposition to the Black Lives Matter movement. The main argument being that saying all lives matter is actually downplaying the systematic oppression and racism that most marginalized communities have to face. And given what these marginalized communities have to face on a daily basis, and how clearly it is presented that not all lives matter on a systematic level. And this sentiment isn't just in regards to BIPOC communities either. Feminist movements, Asian American activists, Native American representation has all been met with the same opposing all lives matter, in response to pointing out the inequalities faced in their communities. But besides from all of that, ever since the whistleblower came forward to the Times, and subsequent acts of violence that were committed as a result of DLive's highest regarded streamers, DLive has been left with a reputation that leaves them as a safe haven for the alt-right, with Fuentes being in the midst of the top 10 ranked streamers, and is estimated just from streaming alone, Fuentes has made well over $100,000 from DLive, although I can't find the specifics on whether or not this is a monthly estimate or if this is a net worth. According to the Times report, record released by Social Blade would show that out of all the top 20 streamers on DLive, most of them were political streamers who aligned themselves with the alt-right. This included Fuentes, but would also include people like Owen Benjamin, who has openly stated that he was part of the alt-right, and Matthew Giebert, who is a neo-Nazi. During the January 6th insurrection, 9 streamers were streaming on DLive their involvement the day of the attack. One of the most noticeable streamers was Tim Gonnet, but the internet blood sports community might better know him as Baked Alaska.
ABC 15's Zach Crenshaw has more on the man known online as Baked Alaska.
Yeah, we need to get our boy Donald J. Trump into office. Yeah, can we do that real quick?
Jeanette has been on the extremist fringes for a while.
He was in Charlottesville, Virginia at the Unite the Right rally.
More recently,
he moved to Arizona, and at one point he was, I think, walking dogs for a living.
December 11th, Jeanette was being kicked out of a Scottsdale restaurant when he maced the security guard. Per usual, he was streaming. from his now suspended DLive account.
We have the video right now, Scottsdale.
But it was saved and uploaded by the Phoenix New Times. Giannette was arrested for misdemeanor assault, disorderly conduct, and criminal trespassing. Booked, then released with condition.
He ended up serving 6 months in prison for his involvement, and the evidence that was used to prove his guilt and have him incarcerated were his own live streams. But even before having to retreat to DLive, Nick did stream frequently on YouTube, and it's here where we're going to start talking about Nick Fuentes' show, America First with Nick Fuentes.
Gay marriage is back on the menu. Banning sodomy is back on the menu. Banning contraceptives is back on the menu. And basically, we're having something like Taliban rule in America, in a good way.
America First with Nick Fuentes began in 2017 during Nick's freshman year at Boston University. Fuentes was exposed to political commentary and its communities through a local TV and radio show that his high school hosted, and they espoused typical conservative talking points. According to Fuentes, America First was categorized through the frequent use of jokes and irony to appeal to the current younger user base of YouTube, and due to this irony, it would give Fuentes plausible deniability when these jokes came to question his own personal extreme beliefs. You see, Fuentes came to the platform around the time that YouTube commentary and political commentary and activism was painted with this thick coat of irony. To paint a better picture of this was during a time where Leafy Is Here had built a YouTube commentary empire off of being ironic and satirical. But the issue with this usage of satire as an excuse for the more harsher aspects of Leafy's commentary would muddy the waters of what satire really was, which was the biggest issue that came with the anti-SJW political commentary community, which became popular around this time. A lot of people originating from this community would meet their opposition with commentary that was extremely problematic.
Joker, what is more important to our culture than the Joker? About a movie, about how people in high places look down and frown upon the poor. Well, pat yourself on the fucking back, Academy. Go pat your woke ass fucking selves on the fucking back. Why is the films in our country, the country which we all fucking watch in the Academy, okay? Why is Parasite then nominated to that? Do we go to other countries and in their best pictures is fucking 1917 nominated? That's a legit question. Can someone tell me if that's true or not?
But all of this commentary was excused to the tone of, well, it's just a joke, bro. But coming into 2018, a lot of these just jokes guys that used offensive comedy to fight SJW talking points turned out to be more serious than we ever thought they were. A good example of this is people like No Bullshit, who would create commentary under the guise of entertainment and satire, but then on a live stream was caught talking about how he was a stepping stone to the alt-right.
Right now we have Nick Fuentes. Perfect. And then we've got No Bullshit, who has a YouTube channel kind of in the anti-SJW sphere. No Bullshit, could you give us a little intro?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Good to see everybody. Good to see the chat going crazy. Well, are you white?
Yeah, I know that this actually will come up. Even though I'm Jewish, I do classify myself as white.
So which one are you first?
Also said that you're Jewish, which is kind of a bummer.
Doxing people that say Hitler did nothing wrong, which there is a strong argument for.
What is race realism anyway? Well, race realism is kind of just common sense.
I mean, I'm just taking the point.
Do you know who Richard Spencer is? Fucking alt-right think tank leader? He's a white supremacist.
I'm not sure if he would say that. I don't think he would say he's a white supremacist.
Obviously, he's not going to say it openly because he's trying to attract people from, moderate viewpoints in his political movement. But he's a white supremacist.
Well, typically, people that are racists don't go around saying, I am racist.
He advocates for an ethno state,
which is white supremacy.
I mean, then would you say that Israel is Jewish supremacy?
What? I'm a conservatarian civic nationalist. I guess that would be how you most easily describe me.
We got to celebrate our differences.
Ooga booga doo, ooga booga doo. Hit a little boogie with it. Oh, what's that? The SpongeBob? Huh? Oh,
Nick Fuentes.
Being an asshole? Oh, you don't say. Weird. It's almost like I knew it from the get-go.
Or even people like Paul Joseph Watson, who would also present himself in opposition to social justice by creating a straw man for comedy purposes.
My penis becomes stiff
and I start to feel like Bill Clinton.
Only for him to now be one of the talking heads on Alex Jones's show. Same thing with Sargon of Akkad, someone who a lot of people regarded as libertarian at most. Libertarian is still right-leaning. I mean, it's basically like diet alt-right. But even so, Carl's problem wasn't even the fact that he was alt-right in sheep's clothing. It was actually the fact that he championed Amos Yee and defended his pro-pedophilic stances under the guise of free speech.
You know, that sounds like you want adults to prey on children. But
exactly.
It's actually not as controversial as you think. For example, I think in the Netherlands, the age of consent is something like 12 or 14. You're being treated like you're a terrible criminal, but that means the Dutch are terrible criminals as well.
Which, I mean, yes, Carl, but people responding also have the free speech to be like, nah, bro, that ain't it, chief. I mean, Carl's a bit of a low cow anyway, so I'm not really worried about anyone taking him seriously.
I don't think women are any different to men in the way that we should treat them. I think we should treat women the same as men. And that means if a woman is being a giant and laughing at male suicide, I'm going to be a giant back to her.
It is acceptable to joke about raping a woman.
Same thing with no bullshit, but people like Paul Joseph Watson have a respectable reputation and a huge audience, as well as others following in his examples, such as JF Gaypers. Gaypers and his involvement in political discourse online would show the rise in internet blood sports. Although the beginning of this genre would be more credited to the live debate with Richard Spencer and Sargon of Akkad, Gaypers is a point of interest for me specifically, mainly because this is an example of where white nationalists made themselves well known and alive in the anti-SJW community. I mean, the red flags were already all over the place. They were just in green for some reason. But Gaypers was a point of contention that it was blatantly there and it was blatantly obvious. To explain what internet blood sports is as simply as I can and as quickly as possible, because the fucking history of this entire genre and all the drama, like, this is the fucking timeline. Like, there is too much here to discuss. Internet blood sports has had a sordid history online. It is a genre of political debate online where the satire of the anti-SJW community essentially went to die, under the guise of being a debate between two extreme ends of the political spectrum. The anti-SJWs and the SJWs making their arguments against each other in a live stream on the same platform, to battle it out with very lax moderation or structure. It was basically a stream to have people with opposing viewpoints basically tear each other to shreds with slurs for some reason.
Like, you know, there are black people, and then there are, just like good old Chris Rock would say, this is a definition of a in the making.
The biggest issue with streamers associated with this genre was that most of the time, streamers hosting these live streams were already alt-right affiliated. So just imagine this for me, if you will. So let's say that you agreed to debate somebody with an opposing viewpoint to you, but the moderation team also has the same opposing viewpoint. And for some reason, your opponent decided to bring all of their friends with the same opposing viewpoint to join into the discussion even if they weren't invited. And to top it all off, it is hosted on a platform where the audience that is watching has the same viewpoint as your opponent. You can see where this becomes an issue, right? And with very lax structure and mediation, this whole thing is just built up to be a dog pile, essentially. And for many of these streams, that's exactly what would end up happening. It got so bad to a point that the most prominent streamers in the genre would only have people of the same political viewpoint to espouse alt-right talking points. One of these streams actually had to be pulled from YouTube by the host in fear of his channel being terminated because the people involved were discussing the inner working and an execution of a white ethno-state. I'm not kidding. The YouTube channel in question was from former anti-SJW political commentator Andy Worski.
Really D. Yeah, chat. When you're throwing out that tweet, make sure to say Andy Worski's coming to kill them. No, yay! Make sure you spell the name correctly, because he's making death threats live on a stream.
Who brought on JF Gaypers as a guest host for his show Worski Live. So Andy's views and political affiliations are really weird. It's obvious from the many live streams seen in the later half of 2019 that Andy was clearly not mentally stable.
Why are you so fucking holy shit, Andy, you're gonna burn something down, you fucking idiot. Why are you? Then you come back the next fucking day and you say, "What's crying?"
And was extremely high on a bunch of fucking drugs. And that's not even a lie. He talked about his recovery story just recently. So, Yeah, he was on crack. And during this time, as Andy Worski is having a mental breakdown, his audience was more or less enabling his toxic behavior and damage that he was doing to himself. And they were more in support of his co-host rather than Andy himself on his own show.
Andy, this is important. I'm not in for low IQ interventions. Andy, so you shut the fuck up for 1 minute.
Andy, either being willfully ignorant or having full acknowledgement of this, curated an alt-right audience that wanted to see their opponents be ripped to shreds. And Andy would make himself an opponent of his own follower base when he made a 2-part series exposing his former co-host. So for you to understand just how bad JF Gaypers really was, JF Gaypers was exposed for, allegedly, trying to coerce an autistic woman with the brain processing capabilities of a 9-year-old to have children with him. While he was a professor at Duke University in Canada, JF apparently had an affair with an undergraduate, who had then come forward to his ex-wife personally to reveal the relationship during their divorce proceedings. And during his divorce, JF threatened to kidnap one of his own children. And to top it all off, the reason why JF Gaypers started his YouTube channel in the first place was because he accepted a donation from Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay, because I announced that just for transparency, because I was talking about a news item about Jeff Epstein, and I announced that Jeff Epstein has once contributed to the start of my YouTube channel with a $25,000 check, and that since then my YouTube channel has kind of taken a different direction, and people were scandalized. They were like, JF is an agent of a Jewish millionaire rapist. And as I
he's that person. You were joking, I presume.
No, I'm not joking. This is real.
The donation in question was to start a non-profit organization to teach science and philosophy to a YouTube audience. That YouTube channel would later become JF Gaypers' YouTube channel, making content discussing scientific racism, race realism, and advocating for a white ethno-state. So on top of being a fucking pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein clearly put his money in the right places. Now, I know what you're probably thinking at this point. What the fuck does any of this shit have anything to do with Nick Fuentes? Because, Lazy, it's kind of sounding like you're just going off on a rant on the blood sports community, and yeah, I kind of am, I'm sorry. Aside from the fact that JF had been in the same circles and live streams with Nick Fuentes,
Halsey, if you want to start on Israel, I gotta warn you, is this a path you want to go down? Is this something you really want to do? You really want to start?
Let's settle down.
This era of internet blood sports and the exposés of JF Gaypers, they just tell us that this side of the community was always like this. It was always heading down this alt-right pipeline. We just didn't know it until it was too late. And by that point, these people were making record live streams, with the Richard Spencer and Sargon debate ended up being on the trending page of YouTube. And I'm not highlighting all of this to say that this stuff isn't important to discuss or anything, but what I am saying is that platforming and entertaining these ideas were eventually gonna lead to this openness of ideas from the alt-right. And that couldn't have been more prominent than with America First with Nick Fuentes.
I don't support women's rights. I don't support LGBT rights. I believe in race and gender essentialism. I'm Catholic. I'm a Catholic reactionary. I believe that organized Jewry is extremely influential in the United States and pushes America towards an open society, liberalism, internationalism for their own benefit at the expense of America. I think they do that corporately. These are all things that I believe.
America First was essentially the alt-right safe space to conjugate and think of the worst thoughts in human history that could ever be imagined ever. To start with America First's controversies, in April of 2017, Fuentes asserted the idea that Muslim speech wasn't covered under the First Amendment right of the United States.
The First Amendment was not written for Muslims, by the way. It wasn't written for a barbaric ideology that wanted to come over and kill us. It was written for Calvinists. It was written for Lutherans and Catholics, not for Salafists, not for Wahhabists, not for the Saudi royal family. Don't think the founders had that one in mind.
Which is weird to say, but he went on to say, quote,
"Who runs the media? Globalists. Time to kill the globalists. I want people that run CNN to be arrested and deported or hanged because this is deliberate.
Okay. In response to this threat of violence, the Right Side Broadcasting Network, which was the publishers of the show at the time, would issue this statement claiming that the comment was unacceptable and inappropriate. Nick would end up leaving the Right Side Broadcasting Network after his involvement was revealed at the Unite the Right rally at Charlottesville. So, obviously, Nick was Republican-leaning, right-leaning, supporting Donald Trump, but on top of, all of that affiliation with, platforms like the RSBN, he is now attending rallies that were organized and held by the alt-right.
I technically don't consider myself alt-right.
There's no hate on this side. I hate no one.
I said, what happened in the good old days 1,000 years ago when people like this, instead of arguing with them or saying, hey, listen, darling, everything's okay, they would dunk them in the river and burn them alive. I said, this is the kind of thing that we need to see more of, is burning them alive a little bit more.
I will say, hey, black people are violent. And then they'll go, I bet you wouldn't say that in front of a black person. Why? Because they're a thug that'll hit me? So you know it too. Okay, so you agree with me. Hitler was the most uniquely evil guy in the world, and we get these cartoonish depictions of electric floors and mattresses made out of human hair and lampshades made out of lips, and we've created this completely cartoonish, nonsensical narrative, and then that's the standard. That's the myth. That's the narrative. So you're either a Catholic or you're a Jew. You're either a Catholic or you're with the Jews. That's how it is.
How dare you? This is a decent nation. This is a good nation of good people. And if anything, this nation welcomed Jewish people into America. And then this is what we get. America welcomed Jewish immigrants throughout the 20th century for various reasons. And then what do? They become successful in media and Hollywood and then browbeat us and call us Nazis and call us exterminationists and say we're murderers. People accuse us of hating black people, and we're the only ones that treat black people with actual respect, honestly. Respect enough to tell them, hey, stop committing crimes. Stop being so illiterate in schools.
There's no hate on this side. I hate no one.
But this wouldn't be the last of Fuentes' organized groups, and we'll get more into his own fan base in a little bit. But before we even get into talking about that, let's talk about some more comments that he has made over the years. Continuing with his controversial remarks, Nick Fuentes is quoting in denying the Holocaust. He claimed in 2019 that the Holocaust was like a cookie baking operation. And to be completely honest with you, I don't know what the fuck that's supposed to mean. So people would look at this quote and interpret it as Nick saying that he was denying the Holocaust. Although Nick's explanation for this comment seems like kind of a cop-out, Nick claims that what he said about the Holocaust wasn't a statement of denial, but it was more of a lampoon or parody argument. Nick relies heavily on this idea that he's just satirical and he's a parody of alt-right commentary, and he uses the satire parody argument to get himself out of trouble like he was Deaf Noodles or something. But he hasn't claimed irony for a while, but going into the later years, he hasn't exactly claimed irony as a defense for what he says, which can only mean that he's not really hiding it anymore. Numerous times on his shows and during his speeches, Nick Fuentes has praised Vladimir Putin for the invasion of Ukraine.
Can we give a round of applause for Russia? Yes.
Which is, really weird to me, because Putin's reasoning for invading and going to war with Ukraine in the first place was supposedly because of this rise of anti-Semitism and white nationalism in Ukraine, which is it's weird because Nick, I thought those were your boys, but oh well, I don't fucking know. The more you dive deep into Nick Fuentes and his history, you'll find that Nick's beliefs and principles are about as wishy-washy as Wishcash. I wrote that down. I don't know what the fuck that means. In March of 2022, Nick is quoted in saying that he supports autocracy.
It's autocracy, you dipshit! Fuck!
Which is the idea that the government and all of its subsequent lower powers is bestowed onto one person without legal restraint. And specifically, Nick believes in a Christian autocracy. In fact, Nick quotes himself as being a Christian nationalist, and he would like Christian majority rule in government.
We need a government of Christians. We need a conservative movement, a nationalist movement led by Christians that obey the Bible and obey God and serve Jesus Christ. Tell me why we need people in government that don't serve Jesus Christ. Is that the argument?
Well, here, Nick, here's why we need Jewish people in government that don't serve Jesus. Sorry, you're never going to win that argument. With Christian rulers and Christian legislators and Christian judges and Christian law and Christians. And Jewish people can be here, but they can't make our laws.
And Christian enforcement of those laws similar to that of Sharia law, but like the Christian version.
We're having something like Taliban rule in America in a good way. We're having something like a Catholic Taliban rule in America.
So that's nice. Nick is also quoted in hating democracy. You know, the thing this country is built on.
And it sucks, and it is what it is, but that's why we need dictatorship. That's unironically why we need to get rid of all that. We need to take control of the media or take control of the government and force the people to believe what we believe or force them to play by our rules. I don't believe in democracy. I do not believe in universal suffrage. That this is a godless country. I hate it.
He is quoted in saying, "You know what democracy has given us? Obesity, low rates of literacy. It's given us divorce, abortion, gay marriage, liberalism, pornography. That's what democracy has given us. Ghettos and crime and political correctness, diversity. Yeah, that track record of democracy, not so good."
You know, they say about America, they say, diversity is our strength, you know. And they'll go, I bet you wouldn't say that in front of a black person. Why? Because they're a thug that'll hit me? Like,
I don't really know how to even respond to that. And of course, because Nick Fuentes doesn't have an original idea in his body, he has also spread vaccine misinformation of the demonetization virus. Ooh. So he apparently had an altercation at an airport regarding mask mandates and had an anti-vaccine speaking tour, which, those are a thing? Really? Like, why though? All right, this is the lightning round. Let's get through these real quick because at this point, this is like things that we expect Nick to believe, so I'm not gonna harp on them for too long. I'm gonna keep all the rest of these short and sweet. Nick is anti-LGBTQ, calling transgender individuals and people in same-sex marriages as deviants.
we have gay marriage and birth control and contraceptives and legal, ubiquitous internet pornography and all the rest, but transgender kids aren't playing in girls' water polo? No. And it looks like pornography being banned. And homosexuality and transsexuality, as well as heterosexual sodomy, as well as fornication and adultery being shamed by the society, and maybe in some places, in some jurisdictions, regulated by the law.
And our secret sauce here, it's these young white men.
He believes that white people are oppressed and under attack.
When are white people going to stand up and say that? How dare you? And white people are always apologetic. Oh, no, I'm not a Nazi. Oh, no, I'm not anti. I would never. No, I'm not this. I'm not that. Hang on. First of all, how dare you? How dare you? We stand for real human beings, truly. But we also stand for whites.
Nick believes in the concept of race realism, which is the belief that there is a scientific reason that proves that white people are superior to other races, like genetically superior.
I believe in race and gender essentialism.
This whole concept of race realism is tied heavily with eugenics, which is the research that headed the Nazi Party. Nick is also incredibly sexist. In fact, Nick identifies himself as an incel who believes that women shouldn't have the right to vote.
Call me a fake all you want. I'm an incel, all right? I know I'm an incel. I don't support women's rights. It looks like a society where women don't have the right to vote. And it looks like women wearing veils at church. And it looks like women not being in the workforce.
He is also quoted in saying that having sex with a woman is gay. And the true expression of heterosexuality is to be an asexual involuntary celibate because having sex with women is gay.
If we're really being honest, never having a girlfriend, never having sex with a woman really makes you more heterosexual because honestly, dating women is gay. Having sex with women is gay.
I give up. I don't know, dude. I give up. I don't care anymore. To sum up all of what this guy is about, Nick Fuentes hates the LGBTQ, is anti-Semitic, sexist, racist, and hates other religions because, according to Nick Fuentes, the GOP is run by Jews, atheists, and homosexuals.
Some might say everybody's entitled to their own opinion and everybody can express their own religion. And so people can have their own countries. And I would agree with that if Christianity weren't true, but we know that it is. And so if that's the case, why should other countries be allowed to be wrong?
The big three, Jews, atheists, homosexual. Okay, so now that we've discussed Nick's personal beliefs, which are wild and weird, let's talk about how he ended up losing it all. Nick's channel was demonetized and then deleted for hate speech. Although what videos exactly got him struck off the platform isn't available for us to look for, we can, take a guess. Reports from the Daily Dot say that the video in question that got him demonetized and then deleted from YouTube centered around Representative Rashida Talbib, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, and Ihan Omar, and it was removed for violations of the site's rules on hate speech. Now, let me emphasize, both of these are Muslim representatives in Congress. And given what Nick has said about Muslims from what I showed you previously, you could probably take a guess on what the fuck he said. So after his banning from YouTube and most social media platforms, surprisingly enough, a lot of political commentators actually came to Nick's defense, including Ben Shapiro when he said,
Nick Fuentes is an absolute disgusting shit show. But if he was banned for his idiotic, garbage viewpoints rather than for violent threats, YouTube shouldn't be deplatforming him.
Okay, a few issues with that, Benjamin. YouTube is a private company that has its own rules and community guidelines that you sign up and agree to when you create an account. When you tick those two little checks to confirm your account creation, you essentially agree to follow these rules. Hence, risk termination if said rules are violated by the person signing up for their platform. And given the fact that Nick on numerous occasions has made death threats against a ton of his political opponents, mind you, including yourself and other constituents at the Daily Wire. Hell, he went on to say this about Matt Walsh. People like, who's this? Matt Walsh guy? Total me not agreeing here with Nick Fuentes, the fuck? No, what the fuck? You're not supposed to be reasonable, Nick. You're supposed to be an asshole. And he's always like this. When a white person does a shooting, suddenly he's a big tough guy. Matt Walsh, Shabu's Goy race traitor? I hope I didn't just say a slur. Oh my fucking god. That's what it is, folks. I know that some people don't like to use that expression, but it's totally true. Throwing his own people under the bus. He hates white people. Nobody else talks like that about their own people except for white people, and it's gross. Yeah, okay, keep typing on twitter.com. Can't say any of those words. Race traitor, you work for Jews, you know. He's talking about you, Ben. So that broadcast of the show was deleted off of YouTube for obvious reasons. But just because Nick goes toe-to-toe with his political commentary colleagues, he's actually playing 4D chess because unlike these social outcasts, Nick has backers in the highest levels of government. Now, how the hell could he have possibly made it this far, considering that he has no social media platform to espouse these ideas anyway? How the fuck did we get from, being banned off of all social media to now actually associating with real people with real power in Congress? What? Well, in order to understand how we've made this fucking jump, we have to start at the origin point of the Groypers, which is the name of his fan base, might I add, and it's not a slur, I don't think. Fuck. Making this video is hard, dude. The Groyper movement, which I'm not even sure if I'm really saying that right, is an American nationalist, Christian nationalist movement with origins that span back to the adoption of the Pepe the Frog meme. The symbol of the Groypers is this version of Pepe, which is a meme character that was adopted and radicalized by the alt-right. And these alt-right members were conjured up on 4chan. The Pepe the Frog story has a whole documentary on the radicalization of the character and how online communities basically muddied and destroyed its original meaning. So I won't go too much into detail other than just recommending the documentary because it's honestly really, really good and you should watch it. But what you need to know is that the Groypers adopted this version of Pepe as their mascot or their symbol. One of the key figures and backers of the Groyper movement is this woman, Michelle Malkin. Michelle Malkin is a conservative political commentator for Fox News. And to give you an idea for the admiration of this person, Nick and his Groyper Nation refer to her as Mommy. Damn it. Look, I'm trying to be educational, okay? I'm trying to take this as seriously as I can, but how the fuck can I make a serious, fucking video about, neo-Nazis and shit like that, when I have to read the phrase, this political movement calls a Fox News anchor mommy. How the fuck can you take me seriously after that? I mean, I'm dressed like an elf, so how can you take me seriously anyway? But still, like, what version of history am I living in right now? I mean, apparently she doesn't seem to mind because even she refers to herself as mommy to this fan base and has openly said that she would proudly call Nick her son. Look, the alt-right has, like, mommy kinks. I don't know what the fuck that's about. I don't know if it's, like, they have, like, mommy issues or some shit. I have no fucking idea. I thought they would all have daddy issues, but I think their moms just didn't love them enough, so I guess I just have to process that now. For many years, Malkin was the speaker for the Young Americans Foundation, but was dropped in 2019 for her open support of the Groyper Nation, as well as openly supporting and associating with Nick Fuentes. And on top of supporting Nick Fuentes, Michelle has also been photographed and identified being associated with the movement, I'm gonna pronounce this wrong, Identity Europa? Identity Europa. I have no idea how to pronounce that, I'm sorry. This movement is essential to Nick Fuentes as he worked in collaboration with the head of this movement, Patrick Casey, the former director of the movement. Both of them organizing and heading the Charlottesville rally. Their slogan, "You will not replace us," was the main chant of the alt-right crowd. So the Groypers don't play second fiddle to conservatives like whatsoever, or other Republicans. Even if they agree on like literally mostly everything policy-wise and morality-wise, they differ in the fact that one calls for the continuation of democracy to an extent, while the other wants total authoritarianism through Christianity. In 2019, the Groypers and Nick would pick a battle with Turning Point USA, which is a conservative nonprofit similar to that of PragerU, and is founded by this guy, Charlie Kirk. Nick does not like this guy. Charlie is just your typical, like, hypocritical Republican who tries to appeal to young college kids and tries to convert them into being conservatives. Charlie Kirk has been on many conservative tours, trying conservative arguments at a college setting and making an ass of himself because most conservative arguments aren't practical or supported by any factual evidence at a college setting. But Nick wanted to bait Charlie. He wanted his followers to follow Charlie around anytime he did a talk or a speaking event at a college or when he was on tour or something like that. These said questions would then prompt Charlie to argue about stuff like Israel or LGBTQ stuff or whatever else to basically expose Charlie as a fake conservative. Which, considering that according to the Groypers, the qualification on what makes a real conservative are really fucking high anyway, I have no idea what the fuck they mean when they say that Charlie Kirk is a fake conservative. You see, the problem with trying to classify someone as a fake conservative according to the Groypers, according to them, the only true conservatives are anyone with conservative viewpoints who are openly bigoted and racist. And like, don't get me wrong, like most conservatives are openly bigoted anyway. It's just that they don't get to the point where they call upon the deaths of marginalized communities.
If the effort to have men cross-dress in front of children is putting people's lives at risk, why are you still doing it? Is it that important to you? And it's not appropriate to bring your child to a burlesque show, you disgusting freaks.
That's where these guys get them, I guess.
Single homosexual in our country should be charged with the crime, the abomination of homosexuality that they have. They should be convicted in a lawful trial. They should be sentenced with death. They should be lined up against the wall and shot in the back of the head.
Except the only people who are calling for the deaths of marginalized communities are not the conservative parties associated with Turning Point USA. If anything, people who are associated with Turning Point USA and PragerU are just hypocritical and stupid. They're just the typical, like, own the libs crowd that doesn't actually effectively do anything. They're not the type of people that are actually going to present any actual solutions to systemic issues. They just want to bitch and complain about shit. The only reason that the Groypers want a call to violence is because they believe in the genocide of those that they don't like. What's scary enough, though, is that these Groypers are actually effective in shutting down events. And it's weird that they're the ones that are doing it to people of their own political affiliation for the most part. And I say it like this because, like, I want to emphasize that in terms of, like, beliefs and ideologies with conservatives and Republicans, these people are nothing in comparison to these fucking guys. They only label themselves with the conservative or right-wing label or Republican because these people know that the moment that they are truly honest about their political affiliations, they'll lose everything. They'll lose respect, platforms, jobs, opportunities, and literally no sympathy can be had for anyone who is openly admitting that they are basically Hitler. The issue right now is that given the current state of how politics are and the recent luncheon with Donald Trump, these things are basically synonymous in the eyes of most people. And to give credit where credit is due, it is comforting to see at least some Republicans completely denounce this luncheon. Some of those people are shockingly Mitch McConnell, even though he just voted against the Respect to Marriage Act. Apparently the guy that doesn't believe that you should have interracial marriages, shockingly enough, cannot stand Nick Fuentes for some reason. Same thing with, shockingly enough again, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who criticized Fuentes and Trump, denouncing the luncheon entirely.
And if they heard his statements that he makes, they would want nothing to do with him. He sounds like a very immature young man saying hateful things about people and using a people group, talking about people he doesn't like by an entire people group, which is horrible. Why would he ever do that? And then also saying, oh, I'm not racist or I'm not these things. Yeah, you are if you talk that way, because that's how you sound. And I don't know why Kanye West would align himself with that. It makes no sense to me whatsoever, because the reality is, why would anyone want to follow or hang out with someone that condemns an entire group of people constantly when he knows nothing? What has he ever done in his life? What government position or when has he ever been elected? Really, how is he so all in the know about all these things that he talks about? Because he knows nothing more than anyone else that can sit there on the internet and Google things and look up information, whether it's real or not, and then talk about it on a podcast or on some social media site. But that's what I'm seeing, and I think it's sad.
Although most people point out that this is painfully ironic, considering that the same conference Nick had praising Vladimir Putin was the same event that Marjorie is seen shaking Nick's hand and giving a speech. So that doesn't look good. But do you know who does back Nick and the Groypers, who actually does have high power in Congress right now? Arizona Representative Paul Gosar, who has ties with the Proud Boys organization and the Oath Keepers. Not only that, but Nick hosted an event called America First Political Action Conference, where notable figures like Gosar attended, as well as former Iowa Representative Steve King. At the third annual event for AFPAC, pre-recorded speakers sent video of their presentations that again included Paul Gosar and Idaho Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeachin. That was also the year that MTG would give her speech, and the same year that Nick would praise Vladimir Putin. But even with the backing of these prominent politicians, Nick couldn't help but make a complete ass of himself. Nick's attendance at the Conservative Political Action Conference was cut short when he was removed from the event after harassing a journalist, and basically crashing the event with his group of white nationalists.
America first! America first! America first! America first! America first! America first!
In a video posted of him crashing the event and being removed, a small crowd gathered across the street, and Nick is quoted in saying to this crowd,
I'm on the Twitter, I have nothing to lose. So this is gonna be the most racist. Anti-Semitic. The most Holocaust denying. Speech in all of Dallas this weekend.
And oh boy, was he now? Nick Fuentes was a participant in the January 6th insurrection, live streaming his involvement on DLive. Several of his followers with America First flags flown through the crowd, hanging the flags all over Capitol Hill. For his involvement in the insurrection, Nick was permanently banned off of DLive, ending the top streamer's reign as the king of political discourse on DLive. Because of Nick's active role in streaming and creating a buttload of evidence on himself, the FBI has placed Fuentes on a no-fly risk in the event that he plans to flee the country. The FBI began compiling a record for Fuentes, creating a record of activity of him threatening political figures 2 days before the January attacks, stating, quote,
What can you and I do to a state legislator besides kill him? Although we should not do that. I'm not advising that, but I mean, what else can you do, right?
Prior to the breach, a crowd of onlookers gathered at Freedom Plaza and were rallied up by speakers, one of which was Nick Fuentes, who was quoted in saying, "It is us and our ancestors that created everything good that you see in this country. All these people that have taken over our country, we do not need them. It is the American people and our leader, Donald Trump, against everybody else in this country and this world. Our founding fathers would get in the streets and they would take this country back by force if necessary. And that is what we must be prepared to do." As his blatant involvement seems to indicate that Nick Fuentes was intending on making this more than just a mere protest of election results. Nick Fuentes' goal was made perfectly clear: to incite this mob to becoming insurrectionists out for blood, many of which proclaiming to be loyalists to Donald Trump, wanting to hang former Vice President Mike Pence. As Fuentes created a mountain of evidence against himself, the January 6th committee subpoenaed Fuentes, Trump, and other MAGA Republicans that were complicit in these riots. So that only leaves us with our current state of affairs, wondering the whereabouts of our wandering white supremacists. Somehow, despite his ass being kicked out of many conservative circles, banned off of all social media, blacklisted from the mainstream media, literally put on a no-fly risk, is a profiled by the FBI white supremacist neo-Nazi, and most of his following base either dispersing or being arrested, somehow this guy ends up sneaking into Mar-a-Lago having Thanksgiving dinner with a former US president. How the fuck did we get here? Well, you see, the story of how we got to this point is actually very fucking weird, and it has so many twists and turns. Oh boy, you will be shocked.
Hey, good morning, Kanye.
Shut the fuck up. Kanye West and Trump have always had a very weird relationship. From Kanye supporting Hillary Clinton in 2016, to then supporting Donald Trump 2018 onward, to him being invited to the White House for some reason, to him suddenly being like over Donald Trump, he's like, I'm done with the motherfucker, to now him being invited to multiple conservative outlets. Some of these invites were from Candace Owens of all fucking people, and now he's here having Thanksgiving lunch or whatever the fuck with Donald Trump, somehow inviting in his friend Nick Fuentes. How the fuck did this happen? Well, Kanye may or may not have told Donald that he was coming. Okay, so here's what we know so far about this luncheon. So Kanye West gets invited to lunch with Donald Trump. They had been arranging this luncheon for a couple weeks now. Before this, Kanye is making headlines talking about how Jewish people are trying to silence him and that he was gonna go DEFCON 3 on Jewish people or whatever the fuck. He effectively gets canceled, everyone starts dropping him left and right. Most of his social medias end up getting revoked at this time, and Adidas actually ends up dropping Kanye, meaning that Adidas's biggest collab, Yeezy shoes, will no longer be in production. But you know who didn't disregard Kanye? These three. Candace Owens collaborated with the Yeezy brand to bring us these White Lives Matter hoodies that fired up Twitter. Honestly, kind of a lame stunt. People forgot about it after 2 days. 2 out of 10, kind of lame. Now, knowing who Fuentes is, with him having white nationalist ideologies, this campaign would swoon him immediately to Kanye. And now they're just best friends chatting it up. And this is just bad news for basically everybody. So at this point, Kanye is literally just being openly anti-Semitic.
I love Jewish people, but I also love Nazis. There's a lot of things that I love about Hitler.
And now he's got an open supremacist backing him up and feeding into this more and more. All right, we're taking a pause here for a second. Ladies and gentlemen, do not be alarmed. Your video is still working. I am just pausing your program to talk about Kanye West a little bit off the cuff, so bear with me. Okay, so I think it's hard to have the Kanye conversation without addressing, you know, the mental health stuff. As a mental health advocate, I feel it is important to highlight when somebody is clearly having a mental episode. Because regardless on whether or not you think that Kanye actually believes in half the shit he's talking about, or if he's like dead serious and is like a literal Nazi, regardless of that, I think it is important to talk about his mental health. Because although I don't think it should be an excuse, I think it does give some valid explanation on how the fuck he got to where he's at now. So Kanye West was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 6 years ago. Kanye West is in his 40s, so for 30 some odd years, he went undiagnosed with bipolar disorder. And for some people, for going undiagnosed for that long, recovery can take an entire lifetime, especially when you get diagnosed in your 40s. And as far as I'm aware, I don't even think Kanye's on any meds right now. I think he's just going off the cuff at this point. Like, I think he's refused like multiple times to actually go on medication. So, and that's fine. Like, regardless on how you take your mental health journey, whether you are medicated or unmedicated or going to therapy or whatever the fuck else, you are completely valid in your mental health journey. I just don't think we should be using that as an excuse. There are a lot of people who are diagnosed with bipolar disorder, who don't turn out to be Nazis, funnily enough, and I think using Kanye's diagnosis to, like, justify this terrible behavior is giving a bad name to people who are diagnosed with this disorder, who, you know, don't turn out to be Nazis. And I think just in general, we need, like, better bipolar disorder representation, because every single representation of bipolar disorder has been, like, this cartoonishly, like, psychotic version, when not every single person with bipolar disorder turns out to be a fucking psycho. I think the most important part to discuss when it comes to Kanye West's mental health is how scummy the people around him are handling it. Nick Fuentes, to be more specific. Like, imagine being so much of a fucking loser with your political ideology that you have to take advantage of the mentally unstable to push your narrative. Now, I know this is going to sound like a generalization, but when I was doing my research for this, when I was looking through, like, Nick Fuentes' fan base, the biggest things that I can find amongst those peers that they all seemingly have in common is that they are either incredibly mentally ill and they admit that, or they identify as some sort of involuntary celibate, or either one of the two. And yes, although I believe that being an incel is a choice that you make whether you actually want to be an incel or not, I do think that the incel movement is full of a bunch of mentally deteriorating men. So the fact that Nick Fuentes is taking advantage of the mentally ill and convincing them down the alt-right pipeline instead of, you know, advising them to actually take care of their mental health, nah, instead of doing that, let's just tell them that it's the Jews' fault that they feel mentally unstable and turn them all into fucking Nazis. Nick Fuentes would not have a fan base if he didn't take advantage of the mentally ill. And I believe that's what's happening with Kanye. Instead of, you know, being a good pal to Kanye and being a good advisor and telling him to get some fucking help, instead he's pushing him down this alt-right pipeline to the point that he is now literally on Alex Jones's show talking about how much he fucking loves Hitler. And I feel like that's a massive fucking problem. Nick Fuentes would not have a fan base if he didn't take advantage of the mentally ill. And honestly, I can't think of anything more vile and evil than that. And also, I don't know where Nick gets the fucking audacity, the idea to tell Kanye fucking West, one of the biggest rappers of all fucking time, that the white race is more superior than him being part of the 1%, was married to fucking Kim Kardashian, one of the most powerful women in the world. He's telling that guy, I'm more superior to you because I have white skin. When, newsflash, Nick, I don't know if anyone has noticed, but Nick has a very unique last name. And if anyone has made that assumption yet, how dare you? We do not assume anything on this channel of anybody ever. How dare you? But your assumptions are absolutely correct. Nick isn't even white. Nick is Hispanic. Are you serious? The fucking guy who is telling Kanye West, an American rapper who is part of the African American community, who is a big representation for that community, is telling him, as a Hispanic, that white people are superior. The fucking caucasity of this bitch. No, don't get me wrong, like, Nick is clearly white passing, so I don't really think this Hispanic, like, heritage really means anything to him. But Nick, just in case you really do want to go back to fucking Nazi Germany, this is the fucking badge you'd be wearing. This is the triangle that represents migrants and immigrants when they got sent off to the camps. Because Hitler hated immigrants. Oh, you think all of a sudden just because you're white passing doesn't mean that your Hispanic heritage isn't gonna matter to fucking Hitler? No, bitch! You would be wearing this fucking triangle and working in the death camps. You stupid motherfucker! Anyways, so where were we? Oh yeah, so Kanye and Nick are besties now, and Nick overhears that Kanye is going to have this luncheon with Donald Trump, his daddy, and he gets super fucking jelly about it. But because Ye is such a good homeboy, Nick gets a free pass to go to Mar-a-Lago to have lunch with his biggest hero ever, Donald Trump. Imagine having fucking this guy, the fucking You're Fired guy, who was on WWE and had his own fucking reality show. Imagine that guy being your hero. You must be very fucking lonely. Okay, so couple problems with this. Ye reportedly never told Trump ahead of time that he would be bringing in a couple of friends, those +2 being Milo Yiannopoulos and Nick Fuentes. And there was a mysterious third person that was invited that I'm gonna address who I think that is in just a second. So here's how that lunch went according to reports. So weeks prior to this, Kanye and Donald Trump are trying to arrange this luncheon in private calls that they were having. Kanye invites his friends Milo and Nick to come along without Donald Trump's permission. Trump has gone on to say that he didn't know who Fuentes was or even that he was coming in the first place. We'll go back to this, by the way. Keep this in mind that he is claiming that he does not know who Nick Fuentes is. Keep this in the back of your head. According to Nick, Trump enters with an uproar of applause from other residents at Mar-a-Lago since, remember, this is a resort and other guests are there attending for vacation or whatever the fuck. Kanye and Trump have a photo op and then they all get seated. Fuentes talked about this luncheon when he sat down with NBC News. But according to others who had witnessed this luncheon, this wasn't like the typical like rubbing elbows with your best friend type of luncheon. It's not like these guys were like fine and dandy people getting along with each other. To his credit, it's not like Trump was expecting these guys to show up for him to suddenly have to start like rubbing shoulders with racist white supremacists. In fact, MSNBC reports that Kanye started the conversation by suggesting that he would be running for president against Donald Trump in 2024, and that instead of running against Donald Trump, Kanye suggests that he should be his running mate and his vice president rather than his opponent, to which Donald Trump ended up laughing in his face and disregarded the suggestion entirely.
Kanye wanted to ask Trump to be his VP, so we asked for a meeting at Mar-a-Lago, and he traveled with a neo-Nazi incel named Nick Fuentes. We'll get into that character later. Trump says the dinner was supposed to be one-on-one with Kanye, but we know it ended up being Trump, Kanye, a former Trump staffer named Karen Giorno, who now works for Kanye, an alt-right racist dipshit named Milo Yiannopoulos. We know what we know about this mostly from videos released by Kanye on Twitter that were since deleted. We know that they all dined together. Kanye says Trump got mad at him when he asked him to be his VP, but that Trump really hit it off with Nick Fuentes. Milo Yiannopoulos said Trump was dazzled by Fuentes, the Nazi. They got in a fight after the VP questioned. Fuentes told Trump that his announcement speech sucked, that he needs to go back to the 2016 team and vibe, that they weren't doing enough for the January 6 rioters who got arrested. And it ended with Trump being mad at Kanye for saying that he's going to run for president and saying, I'll beat you, I'm going to kick your ass.
Trump started basically screaming at me at the table, telling me I was going to lose. I mean, has that ever worked for anyone in history?
You're going to lose. Tell him he's going to lose.
I'm like, well, hold on, Trump. You're talking to Ye.
According to Kanye West, Nick Fuentes wooed the pants off of Donald Trump.
So Trump is really impressed with Nick Fuentes. And Nick Fuentes, unlike so many of the lawyers and so many people that he was left with on his 2020 campaign, he's actually a loyalist.
By criticizing Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, and calling Trump his hero. Now, it sounds like, according to everything that I just told you, that these two were buddies, which would be highly contended by a lot of Trump's party, including other Republicans. Now, keep this in mind when I tell you this. This is in no way to defend Donald Trump for having lunch with these guys. This was from like a political standpoint after he had just announced that he was running for president yet again. Now having news that he was dining with white supremacists isn't the best move. But according to Nick and Milo about their motives on why they decided to break into this luncheon in the first place, the motive for doing this was essentially to just make Trump's life miserable. Okay, so context is clearly needed for this. Okay, so remember when I talked about like Kanye sneaking Milo and Nick into Mar-a-Lago? Well, it turns out this was actually something that Milo planned out from the very beginning. Milo told NBC News that he had planned to use Nick's connections to Kanye as a way to sneak into this lunch. So Milo persuaded after a former Trump advisor. That woman would be this person, Karen Giorno. Karen Giorno was the third party member to get invited to this luncheon. With her connections to the Trump administration from previous employment, Milo was able to convince Karen to use that connection to get Kanye a ride to Mar-a-Lago for this lunch. Meanwhile, secretly planning to sneak himself and Nick as the +2. And the reasoning behind all of this, according to Milo, I wanted to show Trump the kind of talent that he's missing out on by allowing his terrible handlers to dictate who he can and can't hang out with. I also wanted to send a message to Trump that he has systematically, repeatedly neglected, ignored, and abused the people who love him the most, the people who put him in office. And that kind of behavior comes back to bite you in the end. Yiannopoulos would go on to say that he arranged the dinner just to make Trump's life miserable. Because, quote, the news of the dinner would leak out and Trump would mishandle it. Fuentes echoed this same sentiment in saying, quote, I hate to say it, but the chickens are coming home to roost. You know, this is the frustration with his base and with his true loyalists. A source for Trump that came forward on his behalf to NBC claimed that Trump was fuming over this. He believes that Kanye completely ambushed him. According to Trump, the whole reason he tried to arrange this dinner with Kanye was for business reasons. Briefly did this party of people talk about politics, and the only acknowledgement Trump made about Fuentes is apparently that he was happy that Fuentes talked so positively about him on Tucker Carlson, but that he didn't know Fuentes prior to this. So now that we have all three sides of the story, let's see if we can put this whole thing together. Kanye says that the dinner was for business reasons and to seek counsel on running for president in 2024. Milo and Nick were basically there to ambush Trump into acknowledging his more extreme supporters and fan base. Karen Giorno was only attending to get Kanye into the door, but was not expecting Milo and Nick to be there. And Trump wasn't expecting them either. And he felt like he was essentially set up. And then comments that he didn't even know who Nick Fuentes was before this, which Nick actually confirms himself that this was the first time that these two have ever met each other. Okay, so here's the thing, all right? So do I think that this is the first time that Trump and Fuentes ever actually met in person? Yes. But do I believe it when Trump says that he had never heard of Nick up until this point? Well, let's just look at the connections that Nick has to Donald outside of this meeting. So remember when I told you that Donald Trump said that he appreciated when Nick Fuentes was on Tucker Carlson talking positively about him? Well, the problem is that I can't find any clips of Nick Fuentes being on Tucker Carlson. So maybe Trump got confused and he actually doesn't know who Nick Fuentes is and confused him with somebody else. However, Nick Fuentes is on Trump's social media platform Truth Social and he's verified. Also, the January 6th committee subpoenaed both Trump and Fuentes. Fuentes being a massive figure at the insurrection. An insurrection that Trump has openly defended and condemned at the same time. Nick Fuentes was a prominent speaker at the insurrection. Nick has also been associated with politicians that Trump personally approved himself, including politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is basically Trump's fangirl, who is at every single one of his rallies. Turning Point USA knows all about Nick Fuentes and his crowd of Groypers, and their nonprofit has seen speakers such as Donald Trump Jr., Trump's oldest son. Hell, Turning Point USA held a speaking tour for Donald Trump Jr.'s new book, Triggered. Plus, Trump is pretty obsessed with social media. So literally at any point, he could have just searched up who Fuentes was and see all of this shit. So these are the only options that we're left with at this point. Option 1. Trump and Fuentes just have been mentioned in passing, but Trump didn't actually know or hear anything about Fuentes until now. Option 2. Donald Trump did actually know who Fuentes was beforehand, and he's trying to cover his ass up to not look so bad because he just announced his office run for 2024. And obviously, a running candidate for the presidency having lunch with a Nazi isn't gonna look good. Option 3. Trump's security is so fucking bad that they just allow anyone and anybody to have lunch with him, even if it's an FBI recognized white supremacist who is on a no-fly risk. Now, Trump's administration would go on to say that Fuentes didn't talk about his own personal anti-Semitic beliefs at the lunch, which I feel was on purpose to what Milo was planning on doing anyways, so this kind of adds up. But at this point, we're just left with this precedent now. And the precedent that's been set is that white supremacy is growing, and it has now infiltrated a luncheon with a former president. And that should scare you. Look, I'm usually not one to fearmonger on this channel. I'm usually just here to make acknowledgments to make people feel more informed and more safe. If this fucking guy having lunch with the former president doesn't scare you, it probably should.
Trump told me he liked me. Dude, I was just like, oh my gosh. You know? Trump was like, I like you. I was like, me? He said, this guy's smart. Where did you find this guy? I was like, yeah.
Now, before we wrap this up, I have to address this as well. For a lot of people, when we discuss like the cartoonishly evil that like manifests in people like Nick Fuentes or Andrew Tate, who we discussed in a previous upload, or even like Elon Musk, if you want to put him in that category, it's hard not to separate these guys from this idea that they're probably just trolling. Hell, when the original reports came out about Trump's lunch with Nick Fuentes, the headlines were essentially, "The troll got trolled." And when you paint your messaging and brand in this thick coat of irony to mask yourself from any backlash, it is really hard to tell the difference at times between something that's genuine and something that's supposed to be a joke. But for me, it's like the scenario like, I don't want a slave owner making jokes about black people, or I don't want a pedophile to joke about molesting kids. It's kind of just like, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, that motherfucker's probably a duck. And I want to ease everyone who still is in denial of who Nick really is. Look, I know a lot of people are not going to be convinced by me labeling Nick as a white supremacist, a racist, a sexist, a transphobe, a homophobe, because apparently nowadays those words have no meaning because it's been watered down by the internet and nobody can take a joke. And yeah, you could say that a lot of words have lost their meaning to the internet. I don't blame you for thinking that. I don't blame you for thinking that Nick's a troll, because it's hard to believe that this type of hatred and this amount of it can exist in one fucking person. And for a lot of people, it's just a more comforting idea that Nick is just a troll and doesn't actually believe in anything he says, because essentially that just makes him harmless. If it's just Nick's irony and trolling, then we can believe that this person isn't as hateful as he says he is. But from a personal standpoint, in my own personal opinion, I don't think this man is lying. And to confirm my claims to all of you that Nick is who he truly says he is, here are some final quotes coming from the man himself, and you guys can tell me what type of person you think this guy really is. This is words coming from his own mouth. America, for what it's worth, was founded by white Christians. It was not founded by Jewish people. It was not founded by Judeo-Christians. It was founded by white Christians. And white Christians are the majority. Christianity is the religion of this nation, not Judaism, not the Talmud, not that stuff. It's just what it is. It's just the facts. And you know what? If we're going to make America great again, we've got to talk about this anti-white thing that's going on. And if we want to restore America, we've got to make America a Christian nation again. And you can understand why influential Jewish people in conservative media are not really gung-ho about that. They're not promoting white identity. They're not promoting this. And I don't think they're thrilled about the idea of revanchist Christianity. They like the idea of Christianity where all of the Zionists and we're all giving money to Israel and this and that. But they're not really thrilled with just Christianity as is. They want it to be Judeo-Christianity. They want there to be this acknowledgement, and if we want America to be put first, and if we want to do the right thing by God, I don't know that there can be a lot of compromise there. Steve Bannon is a fat that goes onto these shows and says, we're gonna have African American voting 50% for Republicans, and we're going to flood the zone with votes. That's like, literally, he goes on these shows and says that. We have got to be on the right, dragging these people kicking and screaming into the future, into a truly reactionary party. It's instrumental. We're not going to drag them all the way over. But if we can drag the furthest part of the right further to the right, and we can drag the center further to the right, and we can drag the left further to the right, then we're winning. You can call us racist, white supremacists, Nazis, and bigots. You can disavow us on social media from your cushy campus reform job, but you will not replace us. The rootless transitional elite knows that a tidal wave of white identity is coming, and they know that once the word got out, they will not be able to stop us. The fire rises. Regardless on whether or not Trump knew who Nick Fuentes was, the fact that he knows now and he doesn't disavow it is scary. I mean, it feels like the anti-SJW community all the fuck over again. Like, just when you thought all these people were liberals speaking out against the liberal party, it took like one extremist to show that this ideology was rooted in this community from the very beginning. But if we're gonna be fair to both sides of this, we're gonna have to make this very apparent. Something following Joe Biden's address to the people, his Breath of America speech, is how he spoke about the Republican Party. More specifically, how he spoke about Trump's involvement in the party and how it's affected the GOP as a whole and how it conducts itself. Quoting Joe Biden, "Not even a majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. I know this because I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans, but there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans, and that is the threat to this country." He remarks that not all Republican voters are bad people, and that there is a great distinction between MAGA Republicans and Republican voters. And hopefully I don't eat crow when I say this, but I think a distinction can even be made here. There is a difference between Republicans and white nationalists, but there is no difference between MAGA Republicans and white nationalism. So long as the party of the right continues to remain silent of this growing tumor that has attached itself to the party and continues to breed infighting and violence that tears the party apart, then these two things are forever going to be synonymous. And so long as right-wing news networks and right-wing politicians keep adopting alt-right dog whistles and use alt-right talking points to drive their narratives, so long as they keep arguing exactly the same way a Nazi does to get people's rights taken away from them, then this generation will never stop seeing these people as one and the same. When you take comparison clips from Tucker Carlson's show and compare them to Nick Fuentes, they are almost shockingly identical.
Diversity is our strength.
How precisely is diversity our strength?
You gotta recognize the fact that this is a godless country. I hate it.
You're right. They're godless. That is exactly right. I never talk like that, but it's true.
Black people are violent, you know?
They have chaos and violence in their communities.
Send the military into these black neighborhoods, make the streets safe, they'll complain about it. It doesn't matter.
We should send in the troops if necessary to restore order.
Enough with the Jim Crow stuff. Who cares? Oh, to drink out of a different water fountain. Big fucking deal.
Oh, the legacy of Jim Crow. That was 67 years ago. It is ancient history now.
Russia. Can we give a round of applause for Russia?
And why shouldn't I root for Russia, which I am?
The fundamentals of our worldview is society where boys and girls get married as teenagers and start having kids.
We need these ladies to get married. And it's time to fall in love and just settle down. Guys, go put a ring on it.
And they have big families and a high birth rate.
We have to do something to increase our birth rate, or the vacuum that's created will be filled by people that don't believe in our values.
We live in a big Middle Eastern bazaar. We're a big fucking Middle Eastern bazaar with people sitting on blankets and selling cockroaches on sticks.
We have a moral obligation to admit the world's poor, they tell us, even if it makes our own country poorer and dirtier and more divided.
And white people are done being bullied.
Discriminating against and just denigrating white people.
Trump's got to get in there and never leave. Elect Trump one more time and then stop having elections.
President for life, that sounds good. Maybe we're going to have to try it.
And so long as these Republicans are continuing to support Fuentes or is continuing to ignore that he even exists, then they themselves align themselves with Nazi ideology.
The Republican Party has now become the not-see party. They pretend to not see the fascism, to not see the anti-Semitism, to not see the insurrection, to not see the lies, to not see the outrages. And we know from history, when you pretend to not see evil, you are complicit. It takes you over. And so the Republican Party has become the modern-day not-see party. They even have DeSantis passing an anti-Semitic law, which criminalizes Jewish law on abortion. And now their attorneys have the chutzpah, the audacity to say, we don't even get a hearing as Jews to come in and argue our case. They're saying we shouldn't even be able to be heard. The first step towards anti-Semitism in a society is to criminalize Jewish law, which is what the Republicans are doing with their abortion laws. This is an outrage. And the Republican Party, by not speaking up, is now implicated. They're complicit. And the entire party is now going to be brought down.
And I know that guilt by association isn't really an argument, but when you are literally making the same fucking talking points and literally arguing the same fucking shit, It's not even an association thing anymore. These people are just one and the same at this point. The Republican Party's biggest point of contention and their biggest problem is that they're not willing to evolve. They would rather just point fingers and point out the faults of the past of their opponents to basically absolve themselves of the current faults in their own party right now. They keep wanting to point out that the Democratic Party has ties to the KKK and their racism and bigotry in the past, rather than address the rising threat of white supremacy that currently exists amongst their peers right now. And what's funny is that these folks that the Republican Party is supporting with their silence, they don't realize that these guys are cannibalizing them from the inside out. On the day of the insurrection, Fuentes enticed his user base to shout out, "Death to the GOP." The GOP being the Republican Party. These people don't think that the current state of the GOP is good enough for them because they're condemning white supremacy. And that apparently isn't good enough. So the next time you hear someone argue that there isn't a rise of anti-Semitism and fascism in the United States right now, just show them this video. Or show them an article from like the past fucking week. Show these people that a former GOP president just had lunch with a known neo-Nazi. And regardless on if he knew or how it happened, it happened. And instead of condemning Nick Fuentes, the moment the news came out about who he was, all Trump had to say is, "We got along great." This is a problem. And as long as Republicans keep getting along great with people like Nick, they will always be seen as the party that's going to set us backwards. So, I got through that now. I hope that this video wasn't too, like, doomsday for some people, because I know that this topic is very heavy. Like, I'm seeing all this shit come out about Kanye, right? But a lot of people aren't addressing, like, the fucking figurehead that is guiding Kanye on this, like, white supremacist journey in the first place. Like, his fucking white supremacist shaman is literally sitting with him on Alex Jones's show, talking about how much he loves Hitler. And it's like, as entertaining as it is to watch Kanye fumble over himself, a lot of people aren't acknowledging the person who's possibly behind all of this. And I think in terms of like political discourse, it's important for people to know who Nick Fuentes is. Because this guy literally has backers in the GOP. He has backers in Congress. So like, you know, that's a big fucking problem. And look, I'm not worried about Nick seeing this video because I know that he won't spend the time or energy to listen to a woman for like an hour and a half. But I know his fan base will, because his fan base is pretty rampant online. And I'm not really worried about this. They're welcome to like join into the conversation and get like pummeled on by my audience if they want to. All I can say is that if you are going to participate in the comment section, please, for the love of God, at least be fucking creative. Like, when Andrew Tate fans ended up humbling on me for the last few Andrew Tate videos I made, they weren't even fucking clever. They just kept saying the same shit over and over. I mean, for the love of God, make this entertaining for me. Fucking show off your whole ass in the comment section. Fucking do it. Because all that does is, like, create a profile for me on who the fuck to stay away from. And obviously, these people, being who they are gonna make jabs at me about my looks, about how I have a double chin, how I'm fat, how I'm dressed like a stupid anime fairy elf or whatever the fuck. Like, that's not creative of me either. Okay, like, I know that. I look ridiculous. I know. This is my fucking channel. I can do whatever the fuck I want. If I want to look like a fairy bitch, I will do it. If I want to talk about Nick Fuentes and how he's a stupid motherfucker, I'm gonna do it because fuck you. Anyways, so this video is obviously gonna get demonetized, because of course it would be. Even though I'm talking negatively about Nick Fuentes and I am doing this for educational purposes, YouTube's system is stupid. So if you want to support me on Patreon, please do. And believe me, it's not required, okay? I'm telling you now, it's not required. I'm still going to be doing this for free on YouTube. But if you want to get early access to my content a day before it goes up on YouTube, you can do that. Isn't that cool? If you guys have any suggestions on who I should hyperfixate on next and make a giant video essay on, do leave it in the comment section, because that sounds like a fun fucking time. Although I beg of you, please, for the love of God, please, if you're gonna request anybody, can you not have it be like some like misogynistic political fucking asshat? Because like, I can't stand it anymore, okay? I'm tired. I need a break. I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day. My hair looks like a disaster, and I will see all of y'all in the next video. Bye.
It was bad. It was bad for Trump to meet with Nick and Ye. Okay. I had no idea your voice is going to sound like that, Netanyahu.